Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Phil, for the kind introduction. As you said, my name is Matthew Bilson, and I am from the Department of Energy and Climate Change. Within DEC, I work in the office of CCS. So within DEC, there are technology offices on renewables, nuclear, and CCS, and I'm from the CCS area. As you said, I'm here to just give a brief overview on CCS, what the government is doing, before moving a little bit more into MMV, but I'll leave lots of the detail to the other speakers who are better qualified than I on speaking about those specific areas. So just before we go on, this is something a relatively new Secretary of State said a couple of months ago, that we think the UK has one of the best CCS offers anywhere in the world. As Phil said, sometimes in the industry, certainly recently, people have been a bit lackluster, a bit disappointed with how things are going. But we hope, certainly in the UK now, that we are building momentum on CCS. And certainly in the announcements around the 3rd of April, that some of you may have seen, which I'll talk about, give you hope, I suppose. Just before I go on to the detail, just to take a step back, why CCS? Why bother at all with this expensive, unproven technology that the public doesn't understand and doesn't even really seem to know much about? The UK and many countries in Europe have several energy challenges. In the UK, we think our electricity demand is going to double by 2050, so we need more electricity. We need to decarbonise it to meet both European and global aspirations to reduce CO2 emissions. So we need the UK has dedicated itself to an 80% reduction by 2050. At the same time, around a quarter of our existing power generation plants are going to close. So just standing still isn't an option. Even if we do nothing, we'll still lose generation capacity. And what's not on here, but which is also important, is we need cheap electricity. And I'll let you decide what I mean by cheap. But as we've seen recently, both consumers and companies who use electricity will not tolerate expensive electricity. So we need to think carefully how we keep prices down, basically. Ministers they know it's not a vote winner to increase electricity bills. So overall, we need at least over 100 billion of new investment by 2020 in our electricity generation and grid. And that's just the UK. And we're going to be fighting against Germany, France, Italy, other countries for this investment from multinational companies. So lots of challenges. But CCS is in there. It's part of the solution. Broadly speaking, the government is still pursuing a portfolio approach. So we want renewables, we want CCS, and we want nuclear. And the past few weeks have shown why it's so important to make sure we have all three. At the moment, nuclear is, I think, it's not an official view, but it's stumbling. We've seen companies withdrawing from building nuclear power stations. We've seen politically the backbenchers are lobbying against onshore wind. And again, some of the public don't want wind turbines near their houses. And even CCS, there are still people out there who don't understand it, who don't really want it. So we think we need all three to make sure we will still be able to switch the lights on in the years to come. So broadly speaking, this is a kind of the bureaucratic wording we use internally, which I'll just show you here. But because it's quite important, you kind of get in our mindset, if you like, just try and understand us and we'll understand you. So basically what this is saying is we need CCS to be cost competitive. It goes back to the electricity bills. If CCS costs go through the roof, then the market will not choose it. It will choose cheaper nuclear or hopefully cheaper renewables. So CCS has got to be cost competitive with others, and that's the aim, that's the objective of what DEC is doing on the £1 billion competition and our R&D activity. This is what we think CCS could look like in the 2020s. It may look a bit unsexy, but there's a few aspects that's important, and this again marks a shift from where we were about 12 months ago. So 12 months ago with Longannet, we had a competition to select a point-to-point demonstration only on coal. Whereas now, what the government is doing with the billion and elsewhere is being much more open. We'll say we want CCS, we'll do whatever we need to do to get it there. And here we have a mixture of industrial emitters, coal and gas power stations, a mixture of storage sites including EOR, and importantly we have clustering. So both onshore clustering, offshore clustering, and the thicker pipelines are meant to be oversized pipelines, which again, for those closer to government policy will know that's been a slight shift from where we have been. And some of these have impacts and implications for MMV, which I'll come on to the end of the presentation. So just to recap quickly on what we have done recently, 3rd of April was a big day for CCS. We launched the £1 billion competition. So this is, after Longanet failed, after it collapsed, this is the new competition to select new projects. And we have several organisations who are interested. We may announce who is currently interested in due course. We published the CCS roadmap, which Phil has a copy of. I didn't bring any. It's on our website. And really that document is aimed to bring together everything the UK government is doing on CCS to kind of set the tone and the context for what we're doing. And also what we announced, the new UK CCS Research Centre, which on the R&D side we hope will kind of bring together, again, activity on the R&D. This is a pictorial representation of what the UK is doing. I won't go into too much detail on that, but it's 5 key areas that we're doing. So the £1 billion competition launched on the 3rd of April, closes on the 2nd of July, 2nd or 3rd of July, I think it might be actually. We hope to evaluate bids over the summer and announce the next steps and successful projects in the autumn. So we hope quite a quick project. We know the industry is losing patience with government, and we need to act quickly to keep confidence. And we want to get our money out the door. We've got £1 billion burning a hole in our pockets, so we need to spend that. I'll just quickly mention this, because again it's quite complicated, but in some ways it's quite important again. So Edward Davey, our Secretary of State, said we think the UK has got the best offer now on CCS, and there is hard evidence behind that. It's not just politicians' guff. We've got the £1 billion, which will pay for capital funding, which are the two, I suppose on the screen, the two slightly lighter blue boxes on CCS competition funding and CCS competition upfront capital. So it's important to remember that £1 billion is just for the construction phase of these plants. Arguably, the much more important area is the purpley section down here. So companies are going to build their CCS projects. They need a business model. They need to make a profit to return from their CCS investment. Some of that will come from the electricity market, but that alone will not be enough to pay for these projects. So what the government is doing across the electricity market, not just the CCS, is introducing something called contracts for difference. And it's linked to electricity market reform, if any of you have heard of that. So basically this is where a price will be set for CCS electricity or renewable electricity or nuclear electricity, which will be over and above the market price. And the investors will know what their price they're getting, and as I say, it will act as an incentive to invest in these projects and give them a return. And that is worth significantly more than the £1 billion. And sometimes that gets lost in the detail of it, and it's very important, and that's why we think the UK is pushing ahead. To our knowledge, no other country in the world has got this mechanism or is proposing this mechanism. We mentioned the roadmap. This is, again, a list of some of the actions we're taking. Again, for time's sake, I won't go into that. But we're doing lots and lots of things. And then on the R&D, So between 2011 and 2015, 14-15, so for about 4 years, the government will be, and our partners will be investing about 125 million in CCS R&D. So this is in addition to the 1 billion. Broadly speaking, how this is boxed up is there's about 40 million for what we call fundamental research and understanding. So mainly university-led, some good work done by the Energy Technology Institute, ETI. About 30 million on developing components and widgets and applied research. And within that 30 is, as Phil said, the live competitions of 20 million from DEC and 5 million from ETI. And both competitions are on our respective websites. And I'm sure Andrew will talk a bit more about the ETI 5 million. The 20 is quite a broad competition aimed again at cost reduction. If you have a widget or a gadget or a technology which you think can reduce the cost of CCS, so it might be a cheaper component, for example, a cheaper compressor, or you have technology which you think can reduce the risk of CCS and therefore in turn the cost of CCS, then we would be open to potentially funding your innovative idea, innovative technology to test it in the real world. So take it from lab scale beyond that. And then there's about 55 million going into pilot scale demonstrations. Ferry Bridge is already operational. That's a capture plant in Yorkshire. Aberthaw, which is not funded by government, is soon to be operational. And then there's 2 further demonstration plants led by the ETI, which are in planning. And that's where that £55 million comes from. So again, lots going on. Also in the roadmap, we publish a summary version of something that ABTF did earlier. If you haven't seen this document, then I think there's a few downstairs. And within here, there's about 4 pages of what we think are the research needs for CCS. So there's lots of detail, which I haven't got enough space to put on a slide. But this is a summary, a very, very high-level summary on the storage element of what we think the challenges are. So I've highlighted one bit which relates to MMV. And it kind of goes back to the vision of CCS, which Phil alluded to earlier, where on MMV in particular, these are some of the thoughts I just put up. Why MMV? Well, we need it to obviously meet European Commission legislation, we need it to satisfy the UK regulator, and we need it to reassure the public. We've seen how in Weyburn, how CO2 released from somewhere, probably not actually the CO2 store, probably just naturally occurring CO2, could potentially scupper the whole project. And with these early CCS projects, we may need to make sure we've got the public behind us. As you've seen in Japan and Germany, if they turn against technology, then it takes it out of the system completely, which has huge cost implications. And particular challenges, which some people talk about, but if the government, if we are encouraging clustering, then that potentially means you've got different sources of CO2 with different impurities in the same pipeline. How do you meter those? Does that impact your MMV technologies onshore? And then obviously offshore, accurate measurement offshore. So not only is the technology there, can we do it? Can we do it cheaply again? How much is it going to cost? It's no use having these technologies if they're too expensive, because it would potentially affect the economics of it. So just a few pointers to whet your appetites before the other speakers will get into much more detail on MMV in particular. So I hope I rattled through those, and I'll pause for any questions.